From hope to a dream. Those are the words of the first chapter in the book Away from Home, the joys and challenges of immigration. Today I revisit those early years when I was wondering, what more could there be out there? While hoping and dreaming of a different experience from the one I had growing up. Hello viewers, welcome to this episode of Ebenezer. Thank you for joining us each week right here on Preach the Word Network and making this show and this network part of your weekly routine. I opened the prologue of the book observing that the world has become a global village. But for some, it still is a huge planet out there waiting to be discovered. One reads, hears, or watches stories about people of different races, cultures, ethnic groups, traditions, wondering what it is like to experience those differences out there. It seems so far away when you watch it in the news or read certain books. It seems so far away, yet brought so near by technology, using all forms of media. So the desire to experience firsthand the rich diversity that this world has to offer grows with every piece of information disseminated our way. Indeed, I grew up in a place commonly known as Eastlands, the east section of the capital city, Nairobi, in Kenya. The estate was named Mbotela. That is where my childhood was formed, my early grounding, my early years, my elementary school education, my faith, my values. It's a house that Dad had acquired shortly after independence in the early 60s. As a young adult, he acquired this home first as a rental house, and that's where he raised his family. Myself and all my siblings, we were raised in that home. And surprise, surprise, that house has been home to 3 generations of his family. First, him as a young adult started when the estate was just newly built, raising his family, and us, the next generation, having grown up, my brother kept that family home. And he too raised his family in that home. And now the children have grown and gone. My brother and his wife continues to live in that family home. Timothy is their youngest son. We have met Timothy at the end of the first season. Got to know a little bit about Timothy and the work he has done with this show. Today, Timothy comes to reflect on his life growing up in Mbotela, to tell us something about his faith journey and how or who influenced his path to embrace faith, and then the path that has led to his professional journey, what his vocation is. In the first chapter of the book, Away from Home, I capture that early life, what it looked like, but that is within my generation. In my generation, myself and my peers living in Mbotela and in other estates in Eastlands, it was typical to see children live with their dads. Dads lived in the city, had employment in the city. So most of their time was spent in the city. But moms split their times between the city and the village, maintaining the village, the farm, and the homestead, but making time either for necessity or just to take a break from the village, from farming, and joining the children and the dad in the city every now and then. And that was the rhythm of life in our generation. The next generation had a completely different experience. They lived together in the city as a nucleus family. The children who had been raised in the city, predominantly by their dads, completed school, acquired jobs in the city, and as they started their young families, both the mom and dad lived together in the home. There was no split life between the village and the city. They still own properties in the village, and mostly they would go there as a family for vacation or travel to visit parents who are now retired and residing in the village. But they live in the city as a nucleus family together. And so my brother stayed in that family home and raised his family, with Timothy being the youngest in the family. And Timothy will come now and share with us about his life, early life, faith, and also his work with this Ebenezer Show. I will see you on the other side of the conversation. Ebenezer. Welcome back, viewers. Thank you for hanging around. As I mentioned, something about my upbringing and the environment where I grew up. The next generation after me grew up in that same environment, but with different experience. And today we want to learn something about the experience of the next generation from Tim. Tim will tell us something about his experience, early life, growing up. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you so much. I've not grown accustomed to calling you Dr. Florence, so you'll always allow me the Auntie Florence.
Auntie Florence is the right title. Thank you. And Tim, as much as I know you and some viewers know you, there just might be someone here who has not met you. So give us just a quick summary of yourself, something unique to you, and then go right into describing your early life.
Okay, Auntie. So, ladies and gentlemen, the viewers for Ebenezer Show, my name is Timothy Ogot. I was here in the last episode of season 1. I'm usually part of the production team that usually is behind the scenes, but Auntie is trying to make me accustomed to being in front of the camera every once in a while.
Yes.
So something so unique about me is that people perceive me to be a talkative guy, but I'm generally, awfully actually is the word, I'm awfully introverted. I don't know how to make conversations quite easily. I usually have to think about whatever I have to say. So that's quite unique about me, considering the kind of character people perceive me to be. So talking about character, I'll just jump right into the question you've asked about my early life. So I've been brought up in Mbotela. Mbotela is in Nairobi, Kenya. It's in the east sides of Nairobi, usually commonly known as Eastlands to the dwellers of that place. So it was quite fun growing up there, because with my nature being an introvert, I couldn't really interact with my friends that easily. So I grew up accustomed to now film production, video gaming, because that was now my world. I don't have to interact. I don't have to interact with people so much because I was pretty timid growing up. So it really influenced how I grew up. So even in the estate there, people didn't know me as much as they knew my sister. So usually, if they would want to describe me, they would say, "You see that Beryl's brother, who is usually alone." Yeah, so Beryl's brother is usually alone. Go talk to him. So my education life, really, my primary and secondary education, it was all in the confines of Mbotela. I studied in St. Michael's, that was for my primary education. Then went to St. Thomas Aquinas for my high school education, which also happens to be where my dad, Bishop Ogot, went to high school too. So
yes.
I think that's all about my early life.
That's interesting, and I like how you say people say the brother of Beryl, because Beryl was the first And so firstborns tend to get known because you know how people say Baba Beryl, Mama Beryl. Even with my children, I have 5 children, but they'll just say with the firstborn. So when people just say Mama Beryl, Baba Beryl, then they say, and the brother.
Yeah. So I wasn't really known. I wasn't really in the picture.
I'm really glad. And as I mentioned that you are the next generation, and especially having left home by the time you are born, the next generation has come of age. If you were to look back in that season of early life, what was the highlight? What do you consider a highlight? Your primary education, high school education, growing up in Mbotela, what is the highlight?
I remember there was also a point now which I usually consider quite much a highlight because it kind of gave me the voice.
Mm-hmm.
It was right when I was, I think, I was 10, 12 years old, and there was this Swahili teacher in our school who was trying to introduce the debate club for now Swahili in primary school. And he was just on my case. He would pick on me to, do presentations, be the speaker of the house,
Wow.
and so on and so forth. So I think right now, looking in hindsight, I feel like he was actually trying to make me feel how I am right now, to express myself, because I wasn't really that kind of a person. So it was quite a highlight, transitioning from being tendered to individually to being tendered to as a crowd of 55 to 60 students, 60 kids in a class, and now being put front and center by this Swahili teacher of mine who was trying to, bring up that spirit in me of being an orator, should I say.
Yeah.
So those are quite some highlights.
I'm glad. And the simplicity of pointing back to your early childhood education and the transition into public school, the primary school. And by the way, you went to a prestigious, by our standards, prestigious school, St. Michael's, and then followed the steps of your dad. But I see that your parents, they searched and took you to the school, which set your path to where you are today. Now, where you are today also has something to do with faith. We saw in the last episode some of the clips of you helping churches and ministers to connect and have worship virtually. Now, you were raised in a bishop's house, and your mother has been a leader in the church for as long as I've known her. What influenced your life in the direction of faith?
So, in the direction of faith is quite interesting because, yes, both my parents tried to make it a norm and a tradition, always praying at night, always trusting in God in everything, leave alone just when you're going to sit for that paper, early in the morning, you just say a prayer while walking to school. So they really tried to instill that in us. But what influenced my life in the direction of faith so much was actually the church, the clergymen there. Because I remember being a pastor's kid, every Sunday when my dad would go to church, I would follow him wherever he was going. That included the meetings and the lunch when they would go to have lunch.
Yeah.
And I would listen in to conversations. Of course, they were speaking it in vernacular, but I would always catch one or two words. And it gave me the direction of faith because I came to realize that even these clergymen are just still human beings. And like my friends back at home or my teacher in school or, the guy I usually got the bus with. So it gave me another type of understanding of how faith actually works. Because, growing up and you would hear someone is saved and proclaims Jesus as his personal savior, you will be, whoa, that's quite a big deal. Yeah. But, having to interact with these clergymen and realize these are just normal, everyday, regular people.
Yeah.
And it's just that they have something to lean on when things get hard. That really influenced my direction of faith. Because I came to understand God doesn't just choose a few people in the society to be his people. It is usually a personal decision for you to, have faith in him.
I'm so glad you said what you did. I remember in the first episode, I talked about how my dad was hosting a guest who had come for a conference. And the two of them were talking about their faith. And that's how it piqued my curiosity. I was only 11 at that time. I'm really glad some people can interact with clergy and leaders and see their humanness and then walk away from faith. But in your case, you saw them as humans, that they are human, everyday people. And so you saw yourself and saw that, you can embrace this faith. It's not for special, angels or something.
Yeah, it's not for the chosen few.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, I'm glad you've picked this life and this profession. You're just a young adult starting. You are right at the threshold, looking into your professional journey, your professional life. I'm glad you've picked it. Now, Timothy, I know that was you recounted highlight. For now, as we transition, I'd like to ask, do you have an Ebenezer moment? We talk about Ebenezer as that moment that you look back and you say, but for the Lord took me through that. So when you look at kindergarten, primary, high school life in Mbotela, can you pinpoint an Ebenezer moment?
Well, there are a lot of them, but one that I usually take personally was some 15 years back. Actually, I think it is way more than that. I just can't pinpoint the time of in life I was. But I remember it was the time I came to the realization that my dad has actually gone full-time pastor. And I remember the way I came to the realization of that was back then when he was still working for this private organization as an IT tech. There used to be all these vacations that were catered for by the company he worked for. You know, there were all these goodies he would come back home with from work. So it started that he is more at home than how much he should be at work. And I remember it took a toll on everyone at home. But what I can pinpoint as an Ebenezer moment is how we were able to pick ourselves up from that situation to, us still getting back to school. Because I've told you, I started up at home in a private school, a kindergarten somewhere where you're pampered, you're given all the attention that you need. Then all of a sudden I'm being transitioned to a public school where in a classroom we are like 60 of us. So I later on came to understand that public schools don't pay school fees. So that's why they're usually cheaper and everyone opts to go there. So you see, when I came to the realization that the whole thing I was going through was because there was some, shortage in terms of financial income. And I came to accept it and I came to morph into that character and, help out wherever I can. It was quite an Ebenezer moment for me because I was quite a depressed kid growing up because I wouldn't understand why isn't this time of the year where aren't we going to Mombasa like we have gone to, where aren't we spending some vacation somewhere, it would have really bugged me when growing up. But when I came to the realization that it's because these things are being catered for by someone else, it made me appreciate so much in life that every opportunity I will get, I will, appreciate it and make some good thing out of it. So that realization was one of the biggest Ebenezer moments for me because it made me realize that life is not just a piece of cake. And it was quite something personally. So I don't know about the rest of my family, but that realization, like when that bulb went on, that hey, these things are not the same anymore. That epiphany is usually one of my Ebenezer moments in life.
And I have a feeling that it may replicate Ebenezer moment for your family. It was a major transition when your dad perceived a calling. And now he had this job that was well paying and life was good. And when he perceived the calling, he had to leave that job. And I'm assuring you, as someone who has walked that path, it is a long path away from where you know you can budget and where you are waiting from hand to mouth. So thank you.
I remember nowadays is when he usually opens up to me and tells me of those experiences. And I thought that I was getting it bad, but usually when I hear his stories, Bishop, I'm talking of Bishop, I usually feel like he was getting it worse.
As a parent, yes. Thank you. That was a perfect place to stop, but the story has not ended. I want to understand, to know what happened next now that we encounter you. So we want you to come back next episode and tell us what happened next. But I like where we have stopped. An Ebenezer moment. It was God who carried you, who carried your family, who brought you here, and see where you are today, making a difference. So thank you for making time.
Thank you too. See you in the next episode.
We'll definitely see you, team. Bye-bye. Welcome back, viewers. Thank you for hanging around. Thank you for joining us today on Ebenezer Show. As we looked at life as it evolves in distant land, we live in different environments and people get to know their environments really well. And sometimes we depend either on the media or our lessons that we take in school to learn about other environments, other locations, other continents, other cultures, other people. But when we can have an opportunity to hear it from the people themselves, when you don't have to read news about other lands or depend on what we learn, but get to hear people talk about their experience, talk about life as it evolves in their own environment. And that's what we heard today. I have described my upbringing and the environment in which I was grounded as I was growing up, as I was hoping and dreaming of a possibility of one day traveling beyond my own country to experience other places, other countries. It happened in my case, and it has happened for many others, but not everyone. And so other ways that people get to experience other communities, other cultures, other places is by listening to other people's stories when that opportunity presents itself. And today we had an opportunity to listen to Tim as Timothy narrated his story, described his environment where he grew up, and mapped his Ebenezer moments, times when God saw them through him as an individual and them as a family. He grew up in the very house that my dad acquired in his young adult years and raised his family. Then my brother stayed there after my parents retired and settled in the village. My brother settled in that house and raised his family too. The generational gap was different. The experiences we had as children and the experiences that my brother's children, Timothy and his sister, had were different. So to have an opportunity to hear from Timothy what life was like in that part of the world that many people only go as tourists to explore. And even as tourists, they don't get the opportunity to get to know, to see people within the estates, how people live their lives. Tourists tend to stay in hotels, in high-end hotels and at the beach. And every now and then we can get a peek into, like a window into life of people, everyday life. And that's just from one person's perspective. He cannot represent all the people of his generation. But it's always good to hear a story of one person. That's all we can do, one person at a time. And on this show, we always desire to have a platform where people can come and tell us their stories, grounded on faith, influenced by faith. He told us how what influenced his decision to embrace faith was being a son of a pastor and having the privilege of mingling with pastors when his dad was going about his clergy duties, mingling with pastors and seeing that they are normal human beings, living out their faith and leading the flock. And that is what influenced him to embrace faith, because he saw that it was possible. It was everyday people living out their faith. Describing life in Eastlands in Mbotela, we mentioned that it had tendency to toughen people up. Most families were of lower social economic status, and life was tough. Survival was for the fittest. And that reminds me of the book of Psalms 124, verse 1 to 5. If the Lord had not been on our side, let Israel say, if the Lord had not been on our side when people attacked us, they would have swallowed us alive when their anger flared against us. The flood would have engulfed us. The torrent would have swept over us. The raging waters would have swept us away. Growing up in Mbotela, I would not equate it to a situation where we had enemies attack us. However, life was tough and challenging, and there are many people who succumbed to the challenges of life. People who gave in to the temptation. But as Timothy says, one can either, it's like two polars, one can either be engulfed, swept away into that life of hardship and poverty, or one can be motivated to work hard and get themselves out of that life of hardship and poverty. And always the desire is to go back and help others who are also working towards getting their way out of that life, and celebrate together, holding each other's hands, so that together we improve the lives of both ourselves and of those around us. In the last 26 weeks, I've had a second chance to work with Timothy. At the time when we were leaving Kenya, he wasn't born, but his mom, his sister, and his dad, they saw us off to the airport. So I just got the news in a letter when Timothy was born. Didn't get to know him well. So for this opportunity to work with Timothy has been like a second chance. I hope that the stories of your life, the stories that make you who you are stories worth sharing, and you have opportunities to share those stories. And by sharing those stories, you get an opportunity to see the hand of God as He leads you through life. I hope you have opportunities to share your stories, and we also extend an invitation for anyone who has a story to share, a testimony to share. On behalf of all of us here at Preach the Word Network, on behalf of the Ebenezer team, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for spending part of your evening with us. I hope and pray that you'll have a gentle week. Share your stories when you can. Mark your stones of help. And be the reason many people join you in giving glory to God. Ebenezer.